Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining Deepwatch's webinar today, Threat Ready Prioritize for 2024. We'll give everyone a few more minutes to finish logging in, and then we will go ahead and get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent out afterwards. Today, we have with us Neil Humphrey, AVP of Market Strategy, and John Haas, Manager of Adversary Response. I'll go ahead and pass it over to you, Neil, to get us started today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Morgan. Appreciate it. Appreciate everybody joining us for this. Again, the goal is to kind of walk through a way that Deepwatch has of looking at the market, looking at our customers' capabilities on what we call threat ready, and how we can utilize that to really prioritize the actions or some of the operations or even the questions that we need to be asking and answering for ourselves and for our organizations as we look at getting ready for 2024. Again, my name is Neil Humphrey. I am the AVP of Market Strategy. I've been over here at Deepwatch for going on a little over 4 years. I've been around, as you can see from the hair and the beard. I've been around security for a while. Interested to kind of walk through these things with you guys, and I think we've got some very interesting insights to relay. John, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, I'm John Haas. I'm our manager of our adversary response team here at Deepwatch. I've been with Deepwatch about 3 years. Not quite as gray in the beard as Neil, but getting there quickly. So excited to do this.
Insert joke on dog years in security, right? So on that point, let's hit a couple of key pieces on just explaining threat readiness. You know, what is this term? What are we talking about with it? What do we want to get across by using this term within our businesses or within our organizations? And it's a very simple term because it means a pretty simple thing, right? That not just being ready from a detection tooling and controls in place, but also thinking about how you're using those tools, how ready those tools actually are. Saying that you have a hammer doesn't mean you necessarily know how to use a hammer or describe the use of that hammer within your organization. And it really comes down to talking about the ability to conduct assessments on those tools, on those controls, on the processes that you have in place and the communication pieces. Understanding the prescriptive questions that you can be asking within your own organizations to help you make that determination or to help the executives or your management make that determination on if you are threat ready for 24 or not. And then also other pieces that would be talked about after you've answered those questions is a review of your threat surface and your attack surface. Do you know what you might be vulnerable to and how they may be able to get through your tooling, your processes, and your controls? And could those things cause you problems or not within the system? As part of that, we've got a couple of quick stories just kind of hit on of folks who unfortunately made the news and frankly aren't threat ready today. And I'll let John handle the first one.
Yeah, Neil. So great point. So the first one hopefully didn't affect you watching, but if it did, you're in a lot of others' shoes, people's shoes. So it was Move It. So back in late May, there was a Move It vulnerability. It was unique in the fact of the attack method. It was a web shell that didn't have any tooling ingression afterwards. So normally we see a web shell and then we see tools being moved onto the server and go on down the kill chain. With this one, it was a nice little package itself, and Klopp claimed responsibility for it. We did see a lot of fallout. The main takeaways that we ended up seeing were not only no one understood that Move It kept a record of all of the files in a directory on the server, but other organizations, so your HR team, contracts with another vendor, they utilize Move It to get all of the information from your team. They were impacted by it. And so now your organization, through a vendor, had a disclosure that they needed to know about. So that was a big key takeaway for us and our customers that we're talking to them about of how are you handling your vendors and understanding where your data lives, not only inside your organization, but outside your organization.
Cool. Thanks, sir. I'm going to talk a little bit about Clorox real fast. And I don't really want to talk about Clorox from the the technical side of the house, again, I'll let John cover any of the technical things. Clorox is interesting to us from a threat readiness perspective based on the impact that a ransomware event had to the organization and frankly to our store shelves for a while. The thing to think about Clorox is it was a fairly standard ransomware activity that occurred within the environment. Obviously, all of those are bad. But it hit an area of Clorox that we don't really know if they were expecting it to get hit. You look at your controls and where we're putting most of our focus, and we look at our quote unquote critical assets, which we'll talk more about in a bit, are looking at front line, like what's our financials, where's our secrets around how we're mixing some of our chemicals, or how we're building our go-to-market or our key product that we may have out there. Who are our top executives or our VIPs, our standard targets? We always think about criticality from that perspective. But Clorox got hit and had to shut down their order processing system. And on one side, you're thinking, well, that's not shutting down production so much. It's not hitting a direct OT environment. It's not hitting a order or financials on getting paid or sending payments out or anything along those lines. It's order processing. What's the deal with that? Why is that so important? Clorox is a great case study around understanding the criticality of the business versus the criticality of the targets or the criticality of the systems. In this case, because it hit the order processing system and the automated order processing system, it had a big impact in how Clorox actually conducts the entirety of their business. You have to think about it from a production standpoint. And there's a process in production called GIT, or just-in-time production, which is what most organizations use, Clorox included. So when you think about an inability to automatically or predictively submit orders for specific levels of inventory that are needed from a materials perspective, from a chemical perspective, from a boxing perspective, from a distribution perspective, boxing being packaging perspective, from a sales and shipping perspective, everything slowly grinds to a halt because all of these chemicals and all of these materials will have not only a finite shelf time, meaning that some things will go bad or lose potency, but also you have a finite amount of warehousing space. You have a finite amount of shelf space. And as new things come in and they're not being utilized, or you're being utilized, production never really ceased. It just ran out of materials to use in the production, and you don't have anyone picking boxes up. You have that bad example that maybe we'll see as we get closer into the holidays of packages just laying on packages and laying on packages, and potentially going out of expiring from a potency perspective, or not getting to the shelves to be sold in the first place, which is everything that we saw. So Clorox, again, is more of a story around understanding the business priority as we look at prescriptive questions, and less on the type of technology or the unique or the run-of-the-mill, in this case, potentially, form of ransomware or malicious activity that occurred.
Perfect. Yeah, I totally agree, Neil. And actually, as these are listed out, you can kind of see a progression and a slight switch over the year of threat actors not only just targeting and having a very advanced technical knowledge of the code that they're attacking or the system that they're attacking, but they're really starting to understand business process. And it was very interesting to watch throughout the year. You saw MoveIt, a file server essentially, and now Clorox, and now we get into MGM. And what's interesting about MGM, and it was in the news quite a bit, this all started through, vishing. So a threat actor called, hey, I'm so-and-so, I need my credentials reset. A lot of our customers have a global footprint. So you're dealing with multiple dialects. You're dealing with, people you've never met before. So it is a key business process is your password reset procedure. And what we're seeing now is threat actors pivoting into that because it's hard to bypass an EDR. It's hard to bypass a firewall control. it's easy if I just assume the identity of the person that's allowed to do these things. And so this is really the very interesting part of how this has pivoted throughout the year. We actually had been tracking this threat actor that claimed MGM a few months prior. And what we were noticing was they were targeting security admins. They were targeting system administrators. They were targeting the people that they could go find just through OSINT out on the web and understand maybe a couple key things about them, and then go and try this phishing attack. And they're successful. They're very good. Once they get in, the speed at which they move is very impressive. They're very good at system administration type skills. So pivoting, understanding all of the cloud infrastructure that's out there. We're seeing them compromise a security administrator, move into an EDR platform, and install persistence through that EDR platform. Going through SharePoint, looking for keywords in a document, talk more around the actual business process. Hey, how do I get this order form through? Because now that I understand that, I can take that knowledge and craft a very well thought out phishing email to either get payment or send my customers another invoice with a different routing number to come back to. So the main takeaway is threat actors are understanding the entire business process, probably better than most organizational teams across the whole gamut there. But the main takeaway is really understand your process for being able to reset a lot of high value user accounts. That would include, our finance teams, executives, leadership teams, our security administrator teams, and system administrator teams on that.
Cool. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. So after we talked a little bit about the repercussions, the real life repercussions that we've seen from just some issues that have occurred, let's talk a little bit more about how we can take these lessons, how we can utilize some of these pieces and build them as a foundation that we want to use to be able to become threat ready, to talk about those pieces. And John kind of hit on it really well at the end of that last piece on MGM. Right? When we talk about cybersecurity, like we've always ended up talking about the tools that we have, like the ability to do false positive reductions, the fastest mean time to respond, or the fastest mean time to notify or to alert, the other components associated to that. But we really do need to step back a bit from that, from an industry perspective, in my personal opinion, and kind of go back to focusing it on the prioritization of the basics, right? Having the most advanced tactics and the new techniques and the best tools are really irrelevant if you don't have the basic windows and doors shut to your house. If, for example, like John was saying, I can call up, be able to request a password reset from an internal IT admin, get that password reset for credentials that makes me a sysadmin, I don't have to get through your firewalls. I don't have to get through your cloud. I don't have to worry about a business email compromise capability. I just have to be good at social engineering and dealing with the people that you have in place. And I need to know enough about your technology stack, which is really not that hard to find from some basic internet searches, and even looking at Glassdoor or other hiring components that are out there. What technologies you're hiring for? Probably the technologies that you're utilizing. So those types of basic reconnaissance activities are being utilized to circumnavigate very complex detection and controls that are in place, where we just need to think a little bit more basically on this, on identifying windows and identifying doors and the processes that we would use to do that. And some of the pieces that we would think of are some more of the specific log sources that we think you need to be consuming, that you need to be looking at, that allow you to understand or validate if you have, for example, spotty MFA or multi-factor authentication usage. If you are, for example, have outbound remote desktop protocol that's a holdover from the emergency reset of technology that occurred at the beginning of COVID, or you do have that Windows 7 box still floating around in your environment that no one's been able to actually kill or remove. How are you finding those things? What are the log sources or the views that you need to have to really start identifying those? And so John will be talking more on some of those prescriptive questions to ask, and then we'll get into the log sources or the components that you would need to have visibility-wise to answer some of those questions. So, John, I'll turn it over to you, sir, here.
Yeah, and Neil, you hit it right on the head. In the buzzword bingo that our industry generates a lot of times we really want to lean in on AI, ML, all of the new cool things that we are able to do and execute on, and be able to utilize. A lot of those things all revolve around the basic things being in place. So, garbage in, garbage out type mentality there. So, these are just general questions that you should go through as a thought exercise, just sitting at your desk in the morning. Who do you have monitoring your internal network? Do you have the right people? Do you have the people who are not at 100% capacity or more watching this network, because they're going to get burnt out? And so you need to develop that system so that you can have a surety that someone is monitoring this and watching your internal network. That goes right into, are they qualified? Training, education, experience. I work day in and day out with customers who are experiencing an incident. So I have a lot of understanding of the various types of attacks and everything like that. Whereas someone who is in an internal organization, they probably only get to see, hopefully never, but, really exercise that incident response plan once or twice. So there are ways to augment that where you don't have to blow up your network, hopefully. So you can provide the training and the education to kind of augment that experience so that people are ready and they are qualified and, can take action when you need it to happen the most. And that flows right into your management, IR management training. Here at Deepwatch, I serve as the incident commander for incidents. And when we're working with customers going through a bad time, I can't tell you the number of times that someone has said, well, I've got my incident response plan. I am going to go pull that off the shelf. I'm going to dust it off because it has not been off the shelf in quite a while. Open it up. Oh, this doesn't apply to anything that we're doing. So an incident commander really needs to understand the business, the technology that is employed in that business, and all of the right stakeholders to bring into an incident. At Deepwatch, we follow kind of a NIMS model of incident management, and I highly recommend it. It is flexible enough to allow for multiple people to wear the same hat or multiple people to wear different hats, and it's from the National Forest Service actually came up with it to help fight forest fires. So do you have a IR retainer? So another thing that you're probably going to have is cyber insurance, and that cyber insurance will help drive who they have on their approved list for an IR retainer. This is very important to have that number, the IR retainer number. So in our role at Deepwatch, we provide a service that we essentially dub zero to retain. So alert fires, we let you know, you validate it. Yep, this is a bad thing that's happening. I'm going to need some help. So while you're getting this help, we'll come in and stay with you on the phone until that full IR retainer is there. We'll be able to offer containment strategies. And a lot of these times, the people that are real successful in dealing with an incident are those people that have these containment strategies kind of pre-thought out. If I need to start pulling my switches down, who is the person that I'm going to pull on to get that? So it's very important to have that information as well as your internal practices. That kind of goes into security tooling configured appropriately. Am I able to affect change across my entire organization if I need to? Am I able to get those alerts? Is the alert a detect only, or is it taking action on the endpoint? Centralized logging. We're going to go over here in the next couple slides the logging recommendations that we have. It's fantastic just to have it on and living on your endpoints. But if you have the ability to centralize that logging, it makes life so much easier. Are you logging security tooling? And are you logging the cloud? The cloud has various things that are off by default, and some of those that you have to go in and manually enable. So is your cloud infrastructure team aware of those off by default type things? All questions to just go through and ask yourself. And then we touched on the process that are documented and enforced. It is fantastic to be able to go pull that book off the shelf that tells you what to do when things are burning down. We just need to make sure that that's updated. And a great way to do that is just tabletop, test your process. It's great to go through an entire big tabletop with all of the stakeholders at your organization. It's also okay to just do it at your desk for 15 minutes every day. Hey, if I had a phishing email come in right now and a user clicked on it and dumped their credits, what would I do? Those are all very useful, especially if you don't go through those every day. Those are useful exercises to go through. All right. So next, I think go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, sure, John. Appreciate it. So just to, again, summarize some of the basic questions, and they sound redundant. They sound kind of simplistic, but again, the point of this is some of the simple things that we have to do are the ones that we forget about doing the most. So, and take that and use that how you see fit. But what does the first question to ask is, what does your internet footprint look like? Obviously, there's lots of questions around cloud capabilities and shadow IT and other components, but really trying to think about what does the core business look like from the outside world. And then on a patch management perspective, you really do have to focus on prioritizing those edge systems, those front end components. What are we going to get connectivity to first? The other one that is critically important that you need to be asking the entirety of the organization, and not just for their local or their current accounts, their business accounts, but also to ask for their personal accounts, as we just recently saw with Okta, for example. Do you have MFA enforced internally and externally? Are you using internally or MFA for all of your internal accounts? And have you really encouraged your employees, the folks that you work with, your coworkers, to embrace MFA in a multitude of different ways to make sure that multi-factor authentication is really protecting you, as that two-step question that they'll have. When you're looking at hardening of systems, are you really focusing in on not just reviewing those external systems, but have you validated that they have been hardened and that the systems that weren't hardened or the kernels that weren't hardened have been removed? And then John just mentioned from a tabletop perspective, walking through those tabletops, making sure that you understand and that the people who are going to have to be involved understand the processes that need to be hit. Well, that's the update, that's the test, that's the review of your action plans. That's a great opportunity to say, hey, I was just talking to Ray about this last year, and Ray's the primary point control. It's going to be our incident management plan, our incident manager, whenever these things happen. He's going to be the lead off of those things. Ray's actually out on short-term disability. We forgot about that. Right? So those types of things pop up. And do you have secondaries? Do you have tertiaries marked out for if someone's not available? Where else do you go on that very next step? Again, simple things, but the simple things are the ones that we generally forget the most about. And then on a little bit more of the complex piece, like John had mentioned some of the logs. I'll let him quickly hit through our critical secondary and tertiary visibility and log coverage that we know that we need to be able to see.
Yeah. So as Neil said, so these are, you may not have this enabled in your, environment right now. These are ones that you should absolutely fight for. And there's multiple different fights that, people have to go through in organizations to get things turned on. So if you have to, go down to high-risk systems, these are the log sources that we want. So those would be like any of your externally facing servers, a file server, a backup server, even let's say a human resource system or an administrator system. So we want to make sure that we're getting those EDR logs, that could be EDR, AV, or your HIDs. Make sure those get globally deployed across these high-risk systems. So we have, when Windows Defenders turned on a lot of times by default. So we have these are the local event codes that we can pull on that let us know that something really bad's happening. And if you are running CrowdStrike, your Falcon data replicator is a fantastic just treasure trove of telemetry on endpoints. When we go into endpoint activity, we really want these high-risk systems like I talked about, and some of the window event codes that we really want to make sure that we have on. And it's a kind of an older saying, but fight for 2 gigs on every system for just logging. Because it's so valuable from an incident response and a forensic standpoint to just be able to tell that story, what happened on every system. And so some of those that we'll run over, your event log clearing, 104, 111, 02, log in, log out, which is the 46, 24s, and 25s. I'm sorry, 25s is bad authentication. So the one that we run across the most that is the not configured out of the box by Windows is 4688 with command line logging. So these are your process creations. So if a Word document launches a PowerShell, what PowerShell ran out of that Word document, this is the Windows event log that you would want to go look at. It is, like I said, the 4688 itself is enabled by default. There's a group policy that you have to modify to turn on that command line audit. And it is one of the best things that you can turn on, super lightweight, and it's just a group policy that you like. So highly recommend that you guys turn those on. 4720, a user account gets created. Typical, that's one thing that we see pretty much with every incident we work. Threat actor will at some point make an account for themselves. And then add that user to a security group, which is that 4728. And then they normally will also install some type of service. And that's where we're going to key in on that 7045. So if you can get all that, that's fantastic. The next push that you should do is for Sysmon, just a huge telemetry win. If you can get Sysmon deployed throughout your environment, there's a number of configs. The base config is fine. Swift on security is great. There's a modular Sysmon that I really like. You can really fine tune it to your environment if you have those cycles. But if you could just get those turned on, that's great too. And then PowerShell script block logging. This will, if PowerShell is executed on a machine, this will tell you what was run, even if it's obfuscated. So a lot of times, especially with bootloader, we see highly obfuscated PowerShell, and it takes forever to get through the end of it. Well, if you turn on the script log logging, you could just see what ran on the system. So that's a pretty key one to have on. Network security, your IDS. Can't say enough about having IDS on. The one I really want to touch on here is go through the process and work with your net admin team to get X-forwarded for on. So this is going to help you be able to identify who is attacking you from the outside. So if you're not familiar, X-forwarded for is just going to map that chain together for you through NAT, through your load balancers, so that you understand the originating IP outside of your network of where a request is coming in from. It is a heavy lift. It can be a heavy lift. Some technology stacks do it differently, but it is well worth the cycles to spend getting that in. Obviously, VPN authentication logs. What I really want to touch on here is you're going to have, this is our backup VPN that's shut down. That's great. I still want those logs. Well, it's shut down all the time. Yeah, I still want those logs. a lot of times we will see that these devices that are, quote unquote backup or not supposed to be on ends up being on. They're the ones that don't get the security policies pushed, the MFAs push. They're the forgotten ones that end up being a lot of what we see as initial access vectors. We'll move over to proxy and email, web traffic, URL filtering. I would say with URL filtering, the most common thing that we see that would really help customers put themselves in a much better position is there's normally a categorization. And one of those categories is uncategorized, and that's for new domains that are stood up. By default, most people just allow those through. That's just one quick thing you can do. Hey, I'm going to turn off this uncategorized filter or just block it so my users can't get to it. Then we'll go into the cloud. So we have our AWS and CloudTrail, GuardDuty, fantastic log sources, let you really see what's happening in that control plane of the cloud. It is a bit of a lift, and there is configuration when you get into the cloud to ensure that you are bringing in all of that control plane data. With Azure, network security group, flow logs, got to have those in, and you got to configure one. You have to configure them. So it is quite the lift, but it is well worth it. And we deem these as critical. So I think next we're going to go and work through just our secondary ones. So our secondary visibility, if you can get NetFlow is fantastic to let you know what's happening. East-west traffic inside your network is fantastic in tracking lateral movement, helps people scope the incident if you have an incident. I can't say enough. When we run across customers that have NetFlow, it's fantastic. If you have met all of the first slide, critical, and you're, have the cycles for more, let's just deploy all of our servers, all of our, endpoints. It's same event codes that we're looking for. Pretty much it's just a broader scope now. So we did the high-risk systems, critical. Now we're in the secondary, we're going across all servers and digging in a little more. The ones that we could hit on here would be infrastructure. So are we logging DNS and DHCP? Pretty critical for DHCP if you needed to tell the story of an attacker on multiple systems across a long dwell time. Your authentication, just going back into Sysmon again, and window events for Kerberos, the 4771's pretty critical too. And now we'll go into tertiary. And again, as you can see, it's just the same event codes that we're talking about over and over again. We're just wanting them now across all systems. So you got all your servers. Now let's just kick this out to everywhere. And then now that you covered all your systems, you can start looking at other things. So DLP alerts, CASB alerts, looking at your MFA authentication logs, pretty critical, turned on by default at a lot of cloud providers. Okta has very good logging around most of these as far as location comes from. So get visibility into those types of application logs as well. And then even to go to your vulnerability scans. Those are also important just for your external systems, but now we're talking internal systems. So we want, my vulnerability scan discovered 40 new hosts that I don't have a record of anywhere. So, okay, let's go check and see what that is. So that about covers it for prescriptive logging. I think, Neil, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, John. So just to kind of roll this in, and as we get towards the end of this, the piece we kind of want to talk to is a lot of what Deepwatch is talking about into this year and moving into next year really is our idea of moving beyond MDR and becoming cyber resilient, is understanding that bad days are going to happen, and we want those days to be less bad, especially as we look at improving those capabilities over time. In order to do that, we've adopted the NIST cyber resilience definition of the ability to anticipate, withstand, recover, and adapt to activities and adverse conditions and stresses. You can read what's on the screen. But to make it a little easier and really a lot of what we talk about from a cyber resilience standpoint walks directly into our definition and how we look at what cyber resiliency is, like that ability to anticipate the bad things that could occur, how you're going to withstand the bad thing, recover from it. Hopefully you've minimized it as much as possible with the stand. That means recovery is a lot easier, but did you prepare for the worst? And then kind of that after action capability of, can you adapt and improve what it is that you're happening? So what is your risk that you're dealing with on an ongoing basis? And have you asked yourself that question of what is your risk, not just once when a tool is initially installed or once when you do an annual audit? Are you asking yourself about your risks or about your intel or about your capabilities on an ongoing basis? Are you checking your response capabilities, whether from a withstand or from a recover standpoint, on, again, an ongoing basis? And when you're talking about the adaptation, are you improving and adapting, not just within your security tooling or your security policies, but like John was just talking about, that ability to add in and improve based on additional log sources or additional systems to add more context and more clarity to the problems that may be happening. We look at CMDBs, we look at vulnerabilities, we look at external threat intelligence components, or we look at other enrichment sources. What are the other things that you can start putting in place that speeds that ability to respond or helps you understand your risk even more so on a more regularized basis? Things just to keep in mind as we walk through this. As we talk about cyber resilience, one of the main things that we talk a lot about is that right response at the right time. And so we really do ask our customers and ask yourselves to start thinking about, from a threat ready perspective, what are your response plans? We talked about this on, have you dusted them off? Did you try them from a tabletop perspective? But we want to go a little deeper than that on, what is your response plan to a phishing attack? What is your response plan to a malware attack, to a ransomware attack? If that attack occurs against a critical asset or a non-critical asset, to a VIP or a system admin. Those are two very different things. And so think on from a generalities perspective, but also from a kind of a unique conditions scenario. We also talked about visibility and coverage, right? Like John said, you've got 50 new hosts from a vulnerability perspective that you didn't know that you had. That is a real key thing to understand. But also, are you, from a security operations perspective, are you talking to your vulnerability teams? Are you talking to your network teams? Do you understand where, for example, if we talked about NetFlow and East-West, are you gathering that from a tap? Are you gathering that from a span? You certainly probably don't want all of that data, but is there a way of collecting that or dropping it into another bucket that can be utilized on those bad days from a forensic standpoint, but it's not being counted towards your costs of ingestion? Are there problems within the network from a vuln perspective where you're not able to scan devices, so therefore you don't know if they exist, but you did get one scan that works every blue moon when someone's in the middle of say, for example, a firewall update or other activity, and you're on a secondary link, then you can get through. These are all types of coverage and questions, and that gets into that gap analysis that we want folks to continually run. And the key on that, again, is, I don't know, we're sounding repetitive on this, but it's a very important piece to think about. Security is not just the bits and the bytes. Security is the people that are involved in it. And so when we talk about gaps, we want you to think about gap from a tool perspective, from an environment perspective, or from an operational perspective. And that all helps you identify that last bullet, which we'll jokingly refer to as security rust, right? That, yes, I have say, for example, an IDS or an IPS. Well, it hasn't been updated and the rules haven't been updated in 7 months, in a year. Well, why not? Well, somebody turned on automated updates only and no one's checked it in a while. They just assume that it's working. Or that you've got pipes that you think are working appropriately, like John mentioned, the VPN, the backup VPN, that should only be used in case of emergency. Yeah, I do want those logs. That is a potential creaky pipe, or that is a potential crack support. Because one, does it even work? Have you tested your backup VPN capabilities? Two, who's to say that the backup didn't become a primary for somebody along the way and that no one just bothered to tell anyone else in the organization about it? these things do consistently happen, even at very high level, very mature organizations. If systems are around, they're going to get used. And so just, again, looking at that all these pieces that we need to start thinking about, going back to basics and understanding where things sit and where they may be happening. And the last thing is just some metrics and some ideas that we want people to take away from this on how can you help communicate or measure these basics and communicate them throughout your organization and communicate them inside your management or inside your executive staff. I'll let John cover these.
Yeah, and again, just to reiterate, me and Neil haven't said anything that you probably just aren't thinking that, well, yeah, this is all basic stuff. Absolutely. I would rather have an organization that has the basics down and we just, that's what we're really good at. You're going to be in a much better position. But, to help you fight for all of these log sources that we just talked about, because, hey, it is a fight sometimes. There's some KPIs that you can walk into a boardroom and say, these are my KPIs. I need your help to lower these or to get them where I want them. So the first one I kind of heard about, it's from CISA, and it's the percent of known danger time. So basically just breaks down to number of hours per month with a non-mitigated known vulnerability with a CVSS score of 9 or higher. Okay, so it's a lot, but you can do this retroactively and say, hey, we were affected by MOVEit, and it took us probably 3 months to actually get fully patched. So that's a process thing. Hey, I need to work across the organization to get my process better for when a new, hot vulnerability drops. I already know who to talk to in my organization to get that remediated. The other is percent of uncovered assets. There's visibility gaps in every network. And if you hire an intern and say, I want you to run this scan and find out what every one of these systems does, probably worth it. Percent of percent of covered and uncovered critical assets and identities. So, specifically with MOVEit, there were multiple organizations that had sub-organizations that didn't realize that they utilized MOVEit and that they were ingesting files, and those files were living there. We had a lot of hard conversations around early June with organizations saying, we believe that you actually do use this stack in your technology. So a great way to understand that is work with your finance department and say, hey, who are we paying that would be a technology vendor? Or who are we paying that, has a asset or a system inside of our network, and really understand the whole business process. The delta between last critical asset and identities audit. So how often are you going through this process of identifying all of your assets and, all of the things that encompass and that need to be secured when we look at it from a cybersecurity standpoint? What is the true positive versus false positive alert? Is my team working all false positives? They're going to get burnt out real quick, or they're going to get complacent. Either one's going to be terrible. It's just going to be one alert that is the key to uncovering an incident before it becomes an incident. So that's something where Deepwatch is really good at. We work really hard on our true positive rates, getting our detection logic so that when you hear that Deepwatch had a alert sent to you, you know that was something that you're probably going to want to take action on. Okay.
Yep. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. I do want to add one thing on this slide that I do think it's important to think about as we get towards the end of this. When we talk about validated true positive versus false positive alerts, to his point, like we work very hard on the Deepwatch side to make sure that anything that we send over is going to be a true positive based on validation, triage, enrichment, all the things that need to occur to make sure that we're not wasting anyone's time and that we're not going down goose chases. that being said, there is a part of being threat ready and understanding your metrics that we have to look at. There should be a certain percentage of false positive alerts that occur. You can't have all true positives. And lots of organizations will sit here and will all say that, hey, we have a 99% true positive rate. We've got a 95% true positive rate. And that's awesome. It really is good. That's a goal to have. But we believe that you almost need to be looking at true positive, false positives in a bit of a, excuse the analogy, but a bit of a Goldilocks zone perspective. You need a healthy mix of true positive and false positives. If the only thing you ever get are true positives, you're probably missing some of those known unknowns that may be happening in the environment, that because it didn't match an exact understood thing that occurred before, you're not going to be analyzing it. You're not going to be looking into it. You're not going to find something net new within the environment. So just as a being threat ready perspective, understand that, again, take Goldilocks into account. There should be a good mix between a 80-20, 75-25, 90-10. And it's up to you to set what those numbers really ought to be based on your capability to review false positive alerts, your maturity in understanding those alerts, and the ability to work with your logging team, your detection team, or your MDR to help you figure out the tuning requirements associated to those. With that said, we'll end on our last bit of just questions to ask and answer. Again, simple things that just don't get brought up enough. For example, from a vendor perspective, if you are dealing with a DFIR perspective and something does go bump in the night, do you have a good phone number for who you're supposed to communicate with to make sure that you can call that retainer as quickly as possible? What happens if that phone number is a cell phone number, or it's a switchboard number and there's a problem within the line? Do you have that backup? Do you have a known name? Do you know who to talk to? Have you established a working relationship with that person so you know that you've talked to them in the last couple of weeks or the last couple of months? Also, as a tech stack perspective, have you talked to them on what it is that they're utilizing to collect data or to get access to your system, or that they have familiarity from a SIM or logging or from a forensics standpoint? And do those tech stacks match up? Or are you talking to a vendor who may have used a technology and want to use a technology that may not be installable within your environment? Those are just things to think through and understand as you're checking on these things. They may have when you originally signed the contract 2 years ago, but things change. So just check in on that. And, failure to plan leads to other situations, right? Do you have access to their ongoing information as it applies to the IR retainer, to their tech stack, to their technical requirements, and understand that, are these things part of my gold image or are they not? And then what's your backup plan for overall communication externally and internally? If something does go wrong, who are we calling internally? Who are we making sure is on the line? How are we getting ourselves in the right way as quickly as we possibly can? Again, simple things, but you always forget about those when the fan starts and things start flying, right? The simple, common things, the first ones to go out the door, we just want to bring and bubble those back up a little bit more. I really do hope that you guys learned something and that everyone was able to get something out of this, whether it's from a technical detail perspective or from an overall just a reminder of the commonalities that we all have in our capabilities and in our expectations. And I personally would like to thank you for your time and your attention. John, any last words, sir?
No, just simple is sometimes not easy, but it's definitely worth it. So that's all I wanted to leave with.
Cool. Again, thanks everybody. Hope you have a good day and enjoy your holidays.